All right, welcome back. So now we're going to tackle the next fruit in our lineup, which is going to be the cherry. So I've gone and done some image searching here for some different fruit examples. So they all have this stem that kind of juts out right here before it meets the cherry. A very round shape that kind of comes down a little bit at the bottom and then has a dimple here that goes in where the stem attaches to it, and then these edges sort of come up here. So I think first we're going to model the body and the stem, and then we're going to model a leaf. Then we're going to have a second video where we're going to do the texturing on here. And then in the third video, we're going to add some deformers to get some variations. I think we're going to model a classic two-stem cherry that people see so often. And then we're also going to do the single-stem cherry, and we're going to have a leaf in there as well. So now that it looks like we know what we're going to do, let's jump in and start modeling the cherry. So I'm going to start off like with the other fruit. I'm going to use a quad ball. Click and drag as close as you can to the center point. If you don't get it right on the zero, I'm just going to zero those all out with the gang edit. And we want to have a radius here of 300 millimeters. So polygon type, again, Catmull Clark. And this time I want a subdivision of 3 to get me a seam here right on that edge. So I think that is the main base mesh. So Q to drop that tool. So I think our next step of what we want to do in here is we're going to create the little indentation that's down the side. So we could just double click that edge and collect the whole thing, but this indentation only appears on the one side. So middle mouse button, drag, holding the control key will click and deselect all of those. So with our edge selected, go into edge and we're going to extrude that. Click in the viewport to activate. Push in and adjust. So see what our silhouette is looking like there. Getting us that cherry shape that we're after. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so if we hide these, hitting that / key, looks a little bit like a peach, but we're not, I don't like this shape right here. That's very undesirable, so I'm going to go into my vertex mode here. Select this vertex first, and then this one second. And if I go into vertices, I can hit the join, and I don't want any of those enabled. I don't want average, so click OK. And what it did is it took the first one that I selected and then it merged it into the second one that was selected. So now I have a much better topology there for that fruit. I'm going to do the same thing down here. First one, second one, and join. Click OK. So that looking better there. So let's get that indentation in the top going the way that we want. So I select those polygons there and hit shift up arrow just to get the half of the cherry selected. And we're going to hit W to get our move tool. And then once again, we're going to activate our fall off with the cylinder. Make sure that is on Y and on ease out. So now when we move down, we're just really going to be moving mostly that center point. That looks good. Q to drop the tool. Escape to drop the fall off. And I think we're going to do the same thing here on the bottom. Move that down ever so slightly with the fall off. But instead of getting that ease out, let's try the ease in. Maybe move that down a little bit more. Then I'm going to scale that in. I think that's good. That's a good cherry shape. Escape to drop that fall off. So again, hiding those wireframes. Something a little strange to my eyes happening up here. It's kind of giving away its rectangular origin. So I'm going to select these four vertice guys right there. And I'm going to scale that with the R key. Scale those in. Kind of gets more of a round. And let's look at it from the front. I think we're going to want to deform this. So with the soft drag under the deform toolbox, and we want to make sure this transparent option is enabled so it'll work all the way through the object. We're going to click and right mouse click and drag. And we're going to pull up a little bit right here to get that sort of traditional heart shape on there. So let's go back to perspective and see how that looks. Oh, I'm happy with that. I think that looks great. Okay, so now I'm going to select this vertex guy in here, and we're going to start making the little section where the stem is going to connect to that. So we're going to go to the vertex mode, bevel that guy, bevel that up to about 65, 66 millimeters. Jump into polygons mode, hit R, and just scale that so it's flat. Maybe pull it up a little bit. Seems sunk down quite a bit, more than we would want. And then with that polygon selected, we're just going to go to spiky and just fill that in. I think that's all right. Okay, so I think that is our cherry body. Let's start working on the stem here. So I'm going to select this section here, and I'm going to get my work plane aligned to that selection. And then we're going to hit in to create a new layer. Then I'm going to get cylinder, hold constrain, pull that out. We can zoom in here a little bit to make sure we're getting that where we want it. Maybe make that smaller there. All right. We're going to be tweaking this anyways, so that's as good as anything else. So that little piece of the stem, if we look back at our reference, if we can find one that's good and close up, maybe. All right, so you see there's a little piece of the stem here that sort of juts out right at the base. So that's what we're going to try and capture next. So I'm just going to take this, select a couple polygons in a loop, and then Shift B, push that out and bevel down. Now I can hit select the top polygon, Shift up, and then we're just going to scale that in a little bit. See how that's looking. Now with just that top polygon selected, we're going to make the rest of that stem so we can get a good reference for the size it's meant to be. So Shift B. I'm going to pull that all the way up to how long I want my stem to be. So it looks like 974, 975. Right in there seems to be about a magic number for that. So let's hit Q to drop that tool. And since we're going to be doing this subdivision, let's get more edges inside of here to work with. So Alt C, click on there to get a loop slice. And I'm just going to keep adding a whole bunch of edges in here. 24 seems plenty good for what we're doing. Let me scale this down here again a little bit. Constantly refining and looking at the shapes and seeing how they relate to each other as you're modeling things. Let's do a little bit of naming here while we're at it. Let's call this the cherry. We're going to call this one stem. And we're going to save this file. Save as. We're just going to call that cherry01 in the video 5 folder. If you want to open this up and reference it to yourself. Alright, I think that's okay looking. Let's get that subdivided. Shift tab. Okay. Now we're going to build this little top part of the cherry. So they have this little stem guy up here. So we're going to put that on next. So let's do that again with another bevel to create some geometry. Do a loop. And then Shift B. Push that out a little bit. Pull that up. Now let's get Alt C, and we don't want 24 loops in there. Let's try 4. Maybe looks like a good number. So we're going to continue adding some details there, but I think we're going to pause right at this second on the modeling part, and we're going to jump into making a UV map so we can bake out some textures for this when we're done. So like the other fruit, we're going to be positioning these and moving these, and they're going to change their position relative to some locators for some gradients we're going to add. So it's going to make things a lot easier now in the process if we build those UV maps. So let's reset our work plane. Save this guy once again. And let's try building the UV map first for our cherry. So Control Tab to open up our switcher. Go into UV Edit. Just going to disable that background layer. So this is the one that's automatically generated by Modo when we made that quad ball. But I think we can do better with a spherical projection. So I'm just going to grab the projection tool, make sure that's set to automatic at first. And we want this to be spherical. And the nice thing about having the advanced handles on is it gives you this additional display that shows exactly where your seam is. So now I can switch to automatic mode and do 180 here. And it'll put that steam right down the seam where the cherry sort of groove is. So I'm going to Q to drop that tool. Now I don't like this pinching that always ends up happening at the poles of your UV map. So I like to go in and manually fix that. And the way that I do that is by selecting an individual polygon and then opening up your model tool, going to deform, get your element move tool. And then when you hover over this, you can see you select an edge, a polygon, or a vertex. You want to make sure you have this tear off option enabled, and then you hover over that so you just get the vertex. And then just move that guy over there. So drop, T to enable. And we're just going to keep tearing off those edges. So this way it also sort of helps avoid that sort of weird stretching you get when you bake out the texture map. Because it'll just be this long sliver that your polygon ends up taking. But when you fix it like this, that's no longer the case. So it does take a little extra time. But it's these additional details which I think make it all worthwhile. And then one here. All right, vertices. So let's snap all of these guys up to the top. And snap all of these guys down. All right, I think that is a beautiful UV map for our cherry. Let's build one up for the stem. So this one, again, we're going to use a UV projection tool. And we want to do a cylinder for this guy. Let's do automatic. So I think that is plenty good for what we're doing for this particular piece. So now that we've built that UV map for this, let's go in and add some of these additional details for that stem that we're talking about. So jump back to your model tab, control tab. We're going to try and add some organic shapes into this little top of the stem here. I don't know exactly what you call that. We're going to jump into our edge mode here and just drag down on those 4 edges and then hit L to loop select. Jump into our edge mode and we're going to extrude that. And we actually want to push that in a little bit and then widen those guys out. Maybe not so much. 8.5 millimeters negative there and then 3.3 millimeters wide. That looks good to me. So now I'm going to select these bottom loops just by double clicking on those. And then we want to make sure we're going to go into our local action center. And then I'm going to rotate each one of these guys. See how they're all going to rotate on their own local? Select the top one. Do the same thing again, but rotate the opposite direction. So you can go through and sort of individually adjust these, move them around if you like. Something that's going to add some organic variations to this guy. And then I'm going to take this top one and hit just shift up until I select all of those little bumps. I'm going to deform it some, and we're going to use the jitter here. And that is just going to make it a little more random and natural looking. Then I'm going to take this top polygon and bevel that up. So one of the things about the stem is it also gets a little bit skinnier in here and a little bit fatter down at the bottom. So I think maybe I'll select a loop there and push up. Then I'm going to get a linear fall off. Linear fall off. And I want to have none on that. I actually want to activate the deform push tool. Push that out a little bit at the bottom. Now I'm going to select the entire stem and we're going to turn on scale for that. Now I'm going to have a symmetry here. I think we want that at the start where we set that up. You can see where that's placing it. I think I'm going to put that about 2/3 of the way up. Now, why is that not giving me the results I want? I think it's because of our local. That is exactly what the problem was with our action center. So make sure you disable that. So now we actually want to reverse that. That's affecting it in the center here. Sometimes you have these little sort of gotcha moments. You're like, what are you doing, Modo? And it'll take you a second to sort of figure out what it is you've changed. Don't want to get too skinny. This is just a lot of this stuff with realism, very, very subtle differences. All right, so I think the whole stem overall might be the right shape, but it looks a little bit too thin for my eye, so I'm going to use that push again, make sure there's no action center or fall off activated. Just going to push that out ever so slightly, 2 millimeters there. Oh, that looks better. So maybe we'll add some surface here. So select those polygons and hit M and call that cherry flesh. Cherry stem. All right, one final element, save that there, that we're going to model here really quick, is going to be the leaf. We're going to have a leaf, a cherry leaf popping off of here. And I've provided backdrop images that you can use to very quickly model that leaf. So why don't we go ahead and load that right now. So we're going to add a backdrop item in. Put that down here at the bottom. And then we're going to go in here to add clip, load image. And then under the content textures, there's a cherry leaf object right there, which is by default too large. So we want to scale that down to something reasonable. So that looks like about 2 millimeters per pixel. I'm just going to turn these guys off. And then I'm going to hit in to create a new mesh. We're going to go into our front view here. Front view. And then we're going to just drag out a box plane. So I have this here as 7 segments going this direction in the X, and then just 2 in the Y. And that'll allow us to get that shape of the leaf, and then we're going to be using a clip map in the shader tree to actually get all of those fine details. So we're just going to be roughing the outside shape of the leaf for now. So we can drop that. In order to see what we're doing with our backdrop, I'm going to jump in here to wireframe mode, and that'll just show me my polygons. So we're going to select this front part of the leaf first, I think, and we're going to scale that down using a linear fall off. Again, we don't want the symmetry. So let's scale that guy. See what sort of results that gets us. So you don't want to pinch this front part down all the way to nothing. So give it a little bit of space on that, and we can move in that fall off a little bit. That seems to be pretty good. Now we're going to do the exact same thing back here. Move this fall off this direction. All right, Q and escape to drop that fall off. So select all of those polygons. Now we're just going to do a little bit of organic moving around. So I'm going to go into the deform here, grab my soft drag. I'm going to use my right mouse button to scale that. And then just kind of get this shape a little bit closer to the actual leaf itself. Keep in mind there's a shadow underneath this reference image here. I'm going to hit Shift Tab actually to turn those into Catmull Clarks. And now I want to make sure that the center edge is right on the spine of that leaf. So let's tweak that till we get that where we want it to be. All right, I think that's pretty good. So that is our basic leaf form. So just before we start deforming this, let's also make a UV map for this guy. Actually, we have one more task we need to do. Sorry for jumping ahead there. So I'm going to use this, do the double select of the entire edge down where the spine is. We can jump into perspective mode here and turn off that backdrop. And what we want to do is we're going to do an edge extrude. So I've moved it back 20 millimeters, and then I have a width of 14 millimeters there on that. And then I think I want to move that a little bit more so it's moved more in the middle. So I'm going to give that a radial fall off. And let's make that fall off itself a lot bigger in the Y. All right, see how it's just deforming it now in the middle? We can push it really far to kind of get the shape that we want. And then bring it back. All right, now that's our leaf shape. Now we need to jump in and do that UV map we were just talking about. So let's Control Tab to our UV edit. And then we're going to hit Control Shift A to align our viewport to our geometry here. And then we're going to use this project from view. So if we click on there, it's going to fit our geometry into the UV view based on how it looks inside of our view over here. Now in this view, I want to scale that up so that it encompasses the whole leaf, exactly how we did when we modeled it. And then again, you might want to use the model and the soft drag just to make sure that that little edge section actually remains mapped to the little spine down the center. So just to test that out on the leaf, let's name this very quick. To add a material for that first. Cherry leaf. Shader tree. And let's add image, use clip browser, apply that leaf there. So now you can see exactly what that leaf looks like. And I think that gives us the results that we're after. So if we jump back into the model tab, get back to our default shading here. Let's save all of this, Control S. So now we can start deforming this leaf. So if we go to a top view, we can get a bend. We can bend that leaf back, give it a nice arcing position to it. And back in here, just gonna rotate it. We want that roughly aligned with that stem. Still probably too big, so let's bring it down. All right, I think in terms of modeling, we have the leaf, we got the cherry body, and we have the stem. You know, though, I think this section here, I might want to scale up a little bit. Just when I see that in relation to the leaf and the rest of the cherry, it just doesn't seem that it's substantial enough. So always be mindful of the shape that you're after, and keep in mind while you're modeling that you can always make tweaks. And that's one of the wonderful things about Modo is you don't have to work linearly. There's no modeling and then texturing and then rendering. You can go back and you can constantly be tweaking your shapes and your forms on that. So that's our cherry. So in summary, we basically just used a sphere. We manipulated the shape of that in order to build the cherry body using some fall-offs and the transform tools. Then we built the stem just out of a regular cylinder, did some basic tweaking on it, and then we built a leaf just with a quick backdrop item and a UV map to put that onto the surface of our polygon. So next up, we're going to be jumping in and we're going to be doing the surfacing and texturing of our cherry to get us our base surface for rendering. So we'll do that next.